I'm not worried about too much right now about a new vision to come to. I think the vision is more, in grasp than it was before. That's the fundamental change. And the combination of AI enablement into the research and development process and the commercialization process, I think it's going to give us an acceleration that even I didn't think would be possible. Although I'm convinced today that by 2030, world agriculture is going to look very different than it does today.
Welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission. I'm your host, Simon Leach, and we've got a great guest for you today. So Robert Berendes, a scientist turned entrepreneur and investor who's really been instrumental in scaling some of the world's most ambitious deep tech companies. So Robert's coming on today. We're going to explore the journey from lab bench to market impact and what it really takes to build ventures that change entire industries, but also just tapping in. Robert's got a very, very unique background, and, bringing him on the show today to really kind of tap in and, just really kind of delve into your kind of expertise and kind of knowledge around the sector. So Robert, thanks so much for coming on today.
Glad to be here. Simon, thanks a lot for the invitation.
That's my pleasure. Tell me, looking back, what would you say, like thinking about maybe one pivotal moment in your career, right, that really shaped how you think about kind of innovation?
Yeah, there's probably a few, but first of all, the hero of my early days when I was a scientist was a world famous physicist called Richard Feynman, who many people might know as a theoretical physicist, and he had a quote that I can tell you is still top of my list, which says, "What do you care what other people think?" Which is a little bit, the description of how I look at the world. I think for me, it was always the moments in which I thought, that the world was forgetting about the power of innovation and how it could dramatically, in totally unforeseen ways, by the way, change the direction of history. And that, of course, is true in the business world, but as we all know, it changes mankind in how it works, how it interacts with each other, how it lives. And that was a base motivator for me. And the essential reason for the quote is that in order to be part of some of these things, you cannot listen to the chatter of the majority of people, because they will be wrong. And there's another hero maybe that epitomizes this really well, is Max Planck. Max Planck was a physicist and who many people have heard the name, who basically was brought up in classical physics, but was basically the base inventor of quantum physics. And he lived both sides of the world, and he did this relatively late in his career, by the way, which is another thing. We can come back to that one. I think the power of experience and real knowledge and on the ground insight is not in contradiction at all with fundamental transitional innovation. If you keep your mind open-minded and be willing to look at things in a completely different way and accept facts, by the way, that might be completely in conflict with your old view of the world as being the real facts, scientifically said. Facts, of course, these days have a little bit of a bad reputation, but I think I'm talking scientific facts here.
Yeah. No, interesting. How I'm wondering, like, on the career journey as well, where you applied that, because, you were a partner with McKinsey, right? And then, you moved over to kind of Syngenta and where did you kind of really kind of, take that kind of inspiration and use it to kind of drive your career, as it were?
Yeah, there was interesting stepping stones. First of all, I think during the McKinsey times, I focused a lot on the ag industry and how it was transforming itself. That was the introduction of biotechnology to this industry, which is one of the fundamental transformations the industry went through. And it was amazing to see how basically whole industry segments were reinvented. And then obviously, in my time at Syngenta, I think the main theme that I was trying to, make happen is finding ways to bring fundamental innovation, transformational innovation into a large corporation environment. And I learned a lot about the enormous difficulties doing this if you cannot tap into the entrepreneurial genes, desires, vibes, bloodstreams of other people within it. And so, I mean, I think these steps in my career told me a lesson about the need, the essential need of a version of entrepreneurship in a business sense combined with technical innovation. And that's also why I decided for myself that, around half my career path, I would go more into an entrepreneurial space, because I thought certainly for me, the best, most effective opportunity to drive innovation myself in new companies, in startups, in different environments.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And so tell me about agriculture, right? You mentioned it. Well, what was it about agriculture where, it's clear there's a sector that's been so central to your work, And then the second part was, maybe how do you reflect around the evolution of some of this ag innovation over the last 10 years?
Well, first of all, there was an echo in my own past. My family had a farm for more than 500 years in Germany, and it was put into a foundation at my grandfather's generation. So I didn't grow up on that farm, but I was there a lot. So it meant a lot to me mentally in my background. And I reconnected to it basically through after I did my scientific studies and so on. And I had this thesis relatively early on that agriculture was considered a low-tech industry. One of these things, it's done. I mean, it's like the end of history, if you wanted to look at an analogy. And I thought, well, this thing is like a high-tech industry. It has severe deficiencies. It can be done much better. It certainly has fed population calorie-wise, but there were so many other things that could be done better. And that fascinated me. And so both at McKinsey with agricultural clients, and then obviously in my 12 years with Syngenta, and then after that with Flagship, with all the companies we started, it drove me a lot to use the knowledge from within the system to find ways to dramatically improve the performance of agriculture. And what does it mean? It means first and foremost, it means yields and calorie, right? But that was the early part of the story. It was just, productivity per acre in a calorie, in a tons per acre kind of sense, which then over time, and then you asked about the last 10 years, I think has transformed itself into technology innovation that can transform agriculture to something completely beyond just feeding us with base calories. It can, first of all, it can do it in a way that we don't deplete, for example, the soil and the groundwater. And, we call it sometimes, and leave every acre better. So in other words, we improve the quality of the farmland and versus deteriorating or degrading it, which was, a lot of the time happening in the first version of the Green Revolution, which was, let's be clear, it was essential to feed mankind when it was growing so rapidly. But it was also on the back of planetary health. And that conflict now can be completely resolved. There's no conflict anymore. We took it out. The second thing is, of course, using agriculture for different means than just calorie production, becomes meaningful. And human beings have always used it for fiber production, cotton, obviously a typical product. But you can use plant products as a base for many, many things. Lots of renewable things are relying on plant products. And we can do this because we have produced this more. There's also a completely different angle, the question of biodiversity. There was a huge conflict between agriculture production and biodiversity. Basically, it was degrading biodiversity. But that's not a given. It's a collateral damage of an intermediate technology version of how agriculture was done. And doing it in a better way, doing it regeneratively, setting aside land that helps with biodiversity, and that's proven, can keep biodiversity at current levels or even in fact increase it. And then ultimately, you can sequester lots of carbon from the atmosphere into the soil. By the way, the main purpose of this being to make the soil quality better. It is just better soil and it grows more nutritious crops. But at the same time, it can help with the overabundance of CO2 in the atmosphere right now. So I think during those 25 years that I had in agriculture, the whole, realm of agriculture has changed from something that looked like low tech, end of journey, into something that is very high tech, makes technology usable for food production, for planetary health at the same time, and provides benefits to mankind that we haven't even thought about 10, 15 years ago.
Awesome. Are there, because I know at heart, you mentioned you're a scientist at heart, right? And you look technology and innovation really, that's your bag. Tell me, like, any specific innovation particularly that you can kind of lean on as a good example of something really kind of transformative?
Well, I mean, one of the things, obviously, that in agriculture and in plant science you can't go around is the question of how we do understand and then in a way can work with the genome, right? And the plant genome, like when I started in agriculture, even I myself started in science, it was a bit of a mystery, right? I mean, it was a high-level view. You were counting genes. You didn't know exactly what they were doing. You clearly couldn't make a connection between the genotype, so the genetic level, and the phenotype, i.e. the plant, and how it looked like, and so on. You couldn't do it. Then over time, again, during my lifetime as an adult scientist, we started to make connections. So we basically had, an understanding of markers. We could know where in the genome certain genes were located and what they were doing, which was already a great insight. But today's world, versus, in the old days when we were introducing foreign genes, i.e. genes that weren't from plants into plants, and people didn't like it, they called it frankenfood and all these issues with GM modification, which was clearly overdone from a communication perspective, but it was very basic science. Still, in today's world, you can edit the genome within the plant like evolution would do. You do it in a much accelerated way, and you can basically optimize a plant for its purposes that are not only, as I said, calorie production necessarily, but other things: better photosynthesis, better carbon capture, lower water usage, lower fertilizer usage, whatever you can think of, by the way, Simon, whatever you can think of, you can make the changes to the genome in such a way that the change of the genome will make a clearly architecture change to the plant itself in a completely predictable way. You can read and write within the genome through the multiple tools that have been invented over the last 10, 15 years. And I think the transformational nature of those changes will dramatically change, by the way, first of all, how agriculture is done. It will be highly impactful at small-scale farming for poor people in more emerging parts of the world, as they will be for high-tech farmers in Brazil or Iowa. They will be applicable to every crop that we can think of, by major food crops, could be in the vegetable space, could be for trees, and so on, because they are universal principles that we have developed. And by the way, I think they will change the basis of competition as well, which is always an interesting side effect, obviously, of transformational innovation.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that then. How do you see that evolving?
Well, one of the criticisms of agriculture, of course, and that's, again, it's true, is that the industry is a highly concentrated landscape. There's only a very few players that basically, as people say, quote unquote, own the genomes of the world, or own, the plants of the world, and they have patents on it and so on and so forth. And that's part true. It's part true. Certainly the concentration levels are very high. In other words, when you look at, crop protection or seeds or other parts of agriculture, fertilization, they are dominated by a few players, 2 or 3 around the world, trading as well. And often these structures are very, very kind of stubborn to change. We've seen that. Technology innovation is the magic unlock often for, taking competitive situations to a completely different setup. And because, first of all, they fundamentally change revenue streams. They change profit pools. They allow new players to come in and build a position from zero over time to be a substantial player. And the balance of power in agriculture, in the agricultural chain, through these technologies is changing. I think, first of all, it puts more power back into the farmer. Why? Because farmers have more choice. They can buy and purchase their seeds from different players, which gives them an opportunity to make trade-offs between quality and price and so on in different ways than if you have just a duopoly, for example, of offers. Second, you're going to have new players basically coming in that will broaden the basis of innovation, which will make it at least a key requirement if you're an established player to either, compete or outcompete again in that new phase, or lose, at least lose some. You might not be gone, but you might be challenged, or you will be challenged quite a bit. And for the new players to take a share of the profit pool and use it, and if the innovation speed is higher than of the incumbents, then they build position, and then over time they might become the leader. And by the way, that's not, as you well know, that has happened before many times in many industries, and it's similarly to the acceleration that we've seen in the transistor space. Moore's law. There's an analog in genetics as well, which is about, by the way, 5 times faster than Moore's law in terms of innovation speed. That is affecting, of course, the healthcare landscape, but as much the agricultural landscape today. And so with the balance of power changing within the value chain, with new players coming in, I think you're going to see a dramatic acceleration of innovation on the one side and a dramatic change in competition on the other side. And finally, maybe these days that's a term people like a lot. I think it's going to democratize many things, because it's going to allow new smaller players also on the farming space to step in to outperform so much in trading, so much in technology innovation, production, and so on. So I think a very dynamic phase we're entering into, and I'm excited about it, obviously.
Absolutely. No, that's really interesting. So let's dive into a little bit of the flagship work, right? Because what you're talking about, these are companies with really, you've helped kind of incubate with really bold science kind of ventures from the ground up. And it's been some kind of journey, right? So I'm interested in where we are on the journey for some of those kind of companies, like an Inari, an Indigo. There are a couple of companies within that particular portfolio, as it were, right? And the marketplace over the last 5 years has been under pressure. It just seems that the small consolidated players, it's become even more consolidated, and, actually scaling and succeeding seems to be a challenging landscape. Where do you see things, how do you see things evolving from where they are now?
Well, first of all, Flagship obviously is fundamentally different in its value proposition than pretty much everybody in the venture space, because we do start companies from scratch. We send people in labs like every founder would do, and we basically, create companies from zero on. We build teams, and we take technology platforms from nothing to something, often something substantial and sometimes also even very successful in their own right. So, and that is a fundamental process that is well thought through, but it also takes time. I think we have developed a capability to do this many times over. We've started in total more than 100 companies, which is an amazing achievement in its own right. But we haven't yet cracked the code in terms of making it so quick that what formerly took 10 years now takes 2 years. It's not. What formerly took 10 years, it typically takes 10 years still. From the early beginnings to something really massively commercially successful. Sometimes it takes 12 years, sometimes longer. Why is that? It requires the technology innovation in agriculture in particular. That's true for healthcare as well. First of all, to go through substantial regulatory processes. These regulatory processes are the same old regulatory processes that everybody else has to deal with. And so the success of the companies, I would say on their journey is mainly driven by, first and foremost, of course, a technology platform that is so innovative with true benefit for the key customers that the receptivity of having a new product in hand is very high. People need to get the best soybeans, then they will buy Inari product in spades. People will have to have the highest carbon sequestration ton per acre in the agricultural fields, and they're going to get whatever, 30, 40, $50 a ton for this. Then they will basically work with Indigo because it's the most successful way to basically, transition to regenerative agriculture. People will basically see a solution to citrus greening, which has destroyed the Florida's citrus industry, from Envio. And if they do, they will purchase the product and they will put it on tens of millions of trees. It's a very simple logic, but that's a fundamental requirement. If you don't have that, Simon, forget about the rest. Now, if you have it, then the good news is that the regulators do recognize that there is a lack of innovation coming to the farm in agriculture. So if you have those products, they will support you. And they're not going to make your life more difficult than necessary, put it this way. You're going to have to follow all the rules and the regulations and the years and the trialing and everything that's required. And you have to apply very well, but they will, support you in getting to market. And then, of course, the hard work starts because, as in everything you do, our agricultural companies at Flagship, sometimes slightly different to healthcare, basically build their own commercial path to market. They do this typically with partners, but you have to convince the partners that what you have is really convincing to the grower, who is the ultimate decision maker. You have to convince a grower who likes your product to change their practice, which is always a challenge. If you run a business that's just about cash flow break even, you're not going to take a lot of risks. If the promise is there that your cash flow becomes substantially improved through it, you'll probably give it a try, maybe on 5% of your farm or 10% of your farm, but you're not going to do it on the whole farm in one go. You might take 3, 4, 5 years of conviction to take the gene-edited soybeans, to take the carbon sequestration methodology, to take your tree injection for your citrus and apply it increasingly. And here you have it. Here you add it up. You might have 3 to 4 years of base innovation that you get a product that is ready for the field. You take 2, 3, 4 years of regulatory processes in different geographies to get them ready to market. And then you scale them through, and it's one grower at a time at the end of the day, right? Sometimes you can work one cooperative at a time, and that adds another 2, 3, 4 years. And before you recognize it, 10 years are gone. And you then have, if you are successful with all 3 phases, you basically have a very successful company, of course, that gets to $100 million revenues or more, that might even take a significant market share in the North American or Brazilian or European markets, and we go to Asia as well. And so, but that's what it is. And as I mentioned, I think we have developed a phenomenal machine for the base innovation and a great machine to commercialize successfully, but it takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to dive into this. So, my day job, as you know, I'm a recruiter and a headhunter, right? So I've been working with ag tech companies for years, and it's fascinating. You think about the talent required for this, right? So what you're talking about here is, you mentioned it earlier, your time at Syngenta. So you need, innovation. You need to view the world differently. You need to be able to kind of alter the approach, as it were. So what's your experience therefore, and what people are best suited, to this lens of innovation? How much do they need the big company background and experience and the knowledge of the ag industry? And how do you kind of balance that?
It's an excellent question, Simon. I think it's the essential question, of course, for an entrepreneur, and how to build the organization for the endeavor that you're going under. And my experience boils down to I think 2 or 3 fundamental insights for me. First of all, it's a mix mainly between 2 groups of people. Group number 1 is exactly the ones that you talked about, whether they've large corp, mid-sized corp or so, but extensive business and scientific experience over many, many years, sometimes decades. So people that have a very deep knowledge, that have seen how structures work and also have seen a lot of things that don't work, but that have kept, even if they are 30 years in business, have kept the open-mindedness to recognize that next phase might require something fundamentally very different. But they have the inside knowledge from the system brought to the table and then engage in the discussion of creating something completely brand new. And then the other group, which is the group that, from a science perspective, first of all, they're capable of doing this stuff. Look, I did my PhD more than 30 years ago. What I did in my PhD, I worked a lot on X-ray crystallography of proteins. DeepMind basically does today in minutes what took me years, right? And by the way, fundamentally, I do exactly understand what these guys are doing. So that's helpful in my experience. But it's the open-mindedness to recognize, well, maybe there's a version of this that I can do in minutes. And what does it mean for innovation if I can? Now, in order to do this, of course, I need the people that can create the algorithms of today's world, that have the lab work, capable. So I need the deep experience and long-term experience in some folks, and I need the deep insight into the latest, the most leading edge front-end technology at the other end, right? And of course, this is a bit of an extreme. It's a black and white, but it's these two group fundamental skill bases that you need to bring together. And if you want to make it work, then of course you have to create a platform in which these people communicate with each other in open ways, because there might be different generations. They might look at the world very differently. They are different life cycle stages. They have different ambitions. They look for different incentives, and so on and so forth. You have to create an environment that makes both of these groups of people really happy and enable them to work with each other, make them excited about to work with each other. And I think if you find those people and you create some helpful, kind of underlying factors, and you know them well, then I think you can really make it happen. What you will not hear from me is it's either one or the other on their own.
Yeah,
I think they're fundamentally incomplete, both of them, to do it on their own.
Yeah, and just the other part, you mentioned it there towards the end. I'm just curious on this one. Just putting aside leading edge technology or knowledge of the marketplace for a second, I want to talk about an individual's inherent motivation to join the journey and then create the impact. And I'm wondering probably like how important is that aspect to it as well, in your mind?
Oh, absolutely no doubt. That I think you call your podcast wisely, on a mission. There is a mission angle for each and every one of these personalities. There is a bit of a changing the world angle to these people. There is an angle to everybody. That's true for the very experienced ones and the newcomers, that they want to fundamentally, go into totally unknown territory. At Flagship, we call it often doing completely unreasonable stuff. And here's where my original comment about what do you care what other people think is so essential. Don't listen to the chatter of the majority. You have to go onto an island which is uninhabited, and it might be 1,000 miles. It's a little bit like Columbus starting towards India and then recognizing that in the end, well, he called it the West Indies, but he ended in the Caribbean, right? It is the willingness to go on a journey with a completely unclear outcome into territory that other people think is completely crazy to go into, and it's a waste of time, and why would you doing it? And you have too much experience, or you have too little experience, whatever they tell you, that is what it is. And that mission and ambition level is an essential mental feature of people that I think are ultimately successful in this space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to ask a few more questions on the current state of the market, and then I want to kind of touch upon some of your new ventures and some of your thoughts towards the kind of future. I'm thinking, like, when you look at this world of, I suppose, ag/climate tech, as it were, this innovation, this mission, how, and you're looking at how it's funded now, right? With the general view with VCs coming in, how do you see this system working in the future? I'm curious. It's been really difficult with companies raising money recently over the last few years. It's been really tough. I'm just wondering your take on that and how you see the kind of capital kind of flow, maybe innovating as it relates to helping support new companies in the space.
Yeah, no, it's a central question indeed. And let me not comment on the macro cycles that are outside of our control. 21, everybody basically was investing into everything. Today, everybody invests into anything that looks like AI and didn't invest nothing into other things and so on. So there's the ups and downs that are macro, and some of these you have to just live through and go through and absorb. But what fundamentally I think more relevant is for the kind of companies we're talking about is, first of all, there is an urgent need for some successful exits. I think the reason why a lot of investors are looking at it and scratching their head after 5 or 10 years of engagement is but there's not too many agricultural startups that have exited successfully. And when I mean successfully, not just in a moment of an IPO or a sale, but also onward beyond it. There have been, failures and so on. By the way, failures are normal. I'm not criticizing anybody here, but that is, I think, is not helpful. The second thing is clearly that, the part that often is not, coming across in many of these tech innovation type of companies is the commercial side of the success, the profit margins, and so on. People get overexcited about the tech innovation as such, and don't tell, the capital that's seeking investment about, the challenges that come with it. And so I think there's increasingly, there's a lot of smart investors out there that want to hear the whole story, not just the tech part of the story before they're investing. I think that's one thing. The second thing that I'm seeing in agriculture, in particular, also in regenerative agriculture and so on, is I think there's a huge opportunity from what formerly was philanthropic money coming into a commercial version of investment. And the fundamental reason is that many of the philanthropists have recognized that philanthropy is not necessarily the most effective way of spending their money wisely for the future of the world. And then the final thing that I would say is I think we are increasingly seeing family offices. And we're talking family offices today. You're talking about massive investment offices coming into this space. And that is, again, because a lot of people are excited about, the link between nutrition and healthy lifestyles. They're excited about preventive health, by the way, which is a lot about food, nutrition, and the agricultural space. Planetary health as well. They are very excited about healthy aging and so on and so forth. All this, food and nutrition and agriculture have a key role to play. And I think that's going to come into it. But, as I mentioned, I think the investors that I've met, first of all, they love the authenticity of the message right from the beginning. How long is the journey going to take until I can expect a real, realistic return? And what are my commercial and other challenges that go well beyond the technology innovation as such, that I have to overcome in the end to make something successful. If you're upfront and clear about this, you get a much more kind of co-creation relationship with your investors from day one. And even after years of working together, they still know that, real progress is made, even though the final moment might still be a few years away.
Yeah, no, got it. Thank you. So when you think about that cycle, right, from 21, the craziness of the hype, and then the subsequent kind of challenges, where are we on the journey? Are we at the bottom? Are we gone past the bottom? Are we rising back up, as it were?
Well, I would certainly say we're well above the bottom. I think for me, the bottom was much more in a 23, maybe late 22 into early 24 space. I think there is a fundamental excitement there again, which, I think it is epitomized in AI as such. Not so much, well, I'm not talking about the hyperscaler here. That's a completely different ballgame. But I'm talking about how companies at every level of technology innovation are fundamentally changing their business model through APIs, so applying innovation. I think in today's world, if you're a startup in technology innovation, you have to find a way to leverage the investments that the hyperscalers make, give them a little bit of revenue themselves, but make your model, accelerated for the future. And I think a lot of people are recognizing that it changes fundamentally how research is done. I mean, the moment of innovation, is changing through a combined world between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And in agriculture, even human intelligence, artificial intelligence, and plant intelligence, right? So there's really new meanings to this. And in that sense, I think we are clearly on the rise, from the bottom, from my perspective.
Great. And final thing, I know we touched upon this like a few weeks back, but when you think about the next big opportunity globally and where that will be, tell us a little bit around how you're kind of gearing up for that.
Look, this is a very interesting question. We talked about it last time, and I was thinking about it a lot. I would say, first of all, I think we're just at the beginning of seeing genetics applied to real life changes still. I mean, breeding in the majority of crops today is still done the old way. When I'm saying the old way it was done in the 1990s and the 2000s, it's not the old way. But so I think, the opportunity to make changes to the living space and to plants in particular that truly benefit human beings, for example, in their healthiness, in the nutritional value of the food that they're eating, and so on, is completely untapped into. It's completely untapped into. I mean, keep in mind, when I started at Syngenta, we had a little unit that was 25 years ago, where we tried already to do something like pharmaceuticals and plants and this kind of stuff. It never worked at that time. Fundamental, reasons to be discussed at another time. But one main reason was technology wasn't ready. And so now it's absolutely ready, as I mentioned before. And so, I think the fundamental contribution that agriculture it will be making to human health and planetary health in going forward is completely untapped into still. We are still growing more from more. In other words, if we want to grow more soybeans or something, we are requiring more acreage. That trend is going to reverse fundamentally. We're going to grow more from less fundamentally. The world will grow the same amount of crop in a more nutritious way, in a regenerative way, and 30% less agricultural space, which is going to allow a huge amount of biodiversity to happen and so on. So in that sense, I'm not worried about too much, right now about a new vision to come to. I think the vision is more, in grasp than it was before. That's the fundamental change. And the combination of AI enablement into the research and development process and the commercialization process, I think it's going to give us an acceleration that even I didn't think would be possible. Although I'm convinced today that by 2030, world agriculture is going to look very different than it does today.
Fantastic. Yeah. And awesome. No, I could chat to you all day about this, Robert, but I know you've got other things to be getting on with, right? But listen, I just wanted to just appreciate the discussion, the insights you've shared, from your career and experience have been awesome. And, I know all our listeners will love the conversation. So really, thank you so much for coming on today.
It was a pleasure, Simon. Great discussion. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And to all my listeners that tune in, hope you enjoyed the show. Such rich insights from Robert today, and we'll see you on the next one.